welcome to this video where we're going to look at the top 10 RPG games 2017. We'll be looking at some of the most exciting upcoming RPGs of 2017 and be ranking them using 5 key criteria based on some key components that I think determine the quality of an RPG. Obviously, there will be some personal opinion involved in this, but overall I'm going to try to be as objective as possible. What is for certain though is that every game on this list promises to be an exciting release and there should be something to suit everyone's taste on here. So with that said, let's get to it. First on the list is Nioh, an action role-playing game from Team Ninja exclusively for the PS4 and set in Japan in the early 1600s amidst the Civil War. Nioh is a samurai game strongly reminiscent of Dark Souls. It is a strategic hack-and-slash game in which players take the role of Western Samurai William and guide him through enclosed environments in combat against both human enemies and yokai, supernatural spirits and monsters of Japanese folklore. This game has been in the pipeline since 2004 and honestly, I don't really totally think it is worth the wait. It's really similar to Dark Souls and I didn't rate Dark Souls all that highly, so I'm not personally super excited, but for fans of Dark Souls, this shouldn't disappoint. It has that kind of dark, atmospheric setting that should be familiar and promises tough gameplay that will appeal to players who like the challenge of difficult combat. Overall, I'm giving this 35 out of 50 as it loses some points for creativity for me, as in some ways it does feel like a rehash of Dark Souls. Next up is South Park, The Fractured But Whole. Now, what can I tell you about South Park that you don't already know? Developed by Ubisoft San Francisco, South Park The Fractured But Whole, or The Fractured Butthole, sequel to The Stick of Truth, is planned for release on Xbox One, PS4 and PC in 2017. The game will feature 12 superhero classes: Blaster, Brutalist, Speedster, Elementalist, Gadgeteer, Mystic, Cyborg, Psychic, Assassin, Commander, Netherborn and Karate Kid. Players play as the new kid, battling the forces of evil in a civil war between Coon and Friends and rival group Freedom Pals. Players have a lot of choice within the character creation stage of the game and can choose exactly what type of superhero they want to be, as well as the gender of the character. This is a hard one to rate, as whether or not you'll like this highly depends on whether or not you actually rate the South Park series in general. The combat system is still largely turn-based and strategic, like in The Stick of Truth, but in the new game you can also now move around spatially within combat to take advantage of tactical positions, cover, and prop/obstacles. Farts can be utilised to manipulate time and rearrange turn order. Obviously, comedy value is high. The story arc is naturally more of a mock-up of a narrative, but you would expect it to be hilarious in true South Park style. Basically, if you're a fan, you'll like it. If you're not, well, then maybe don't buy it. Next, we come to the only game on this list released on a Nintendo platform, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Ah, the nostalgia. This takes me back to my childhood playing Ocarina of Time. Some of you are right now writing comments saying, this isn't an RPG, it's an action-adventure video game. And you're right, I know, but it does contain elements that a lot of people would consider to be shared with the RPG genre, and a lot of people would be disappointed if it wasn't on this list, so I've included it anyway. Zelda is clearly an absolute classic from Nintendo, and is one of only a few games by Nintendo that has lots of different, true RPG elements. Breath of the Wild is due for release on the Wii U in 2017, although the deadline has been pushed back quite a few times, so maybe take that deadline with a pinch of salt. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think of the Wii U, I think of minigames. Games for parties, you know, fun, easygoing, multiplayer games like Mario Kart. So, it should be interesting to see how a really great RPG like this holds up on the platform. Of course, Skyward Sword was released on the Wii in 2011 and received fantastic reviews, with some reviews such as from IGN calling its combat system a revelation. I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of Zelda games that have been released for handheld consoles, so I am super excited for this. Breath of the Wild features many new features that signal a rethinking of the series. It's the first HD game in the series, as well as the first with an open world structure. The game is beautiful in its own kind of distinctive way. The artwork is gorgeous and quirky and true to the feel of the franchise, but for me it doesn't quite match many of the other games on this list. The characters' movements sometimes look a little clunky and out of place. For me, it's just not quite as beautiful a setting as some of the others, but it definitely has its own unique kind of beauty. The combat system promises to contain many interesting new elements, such as a slow-mo mode activated when players jump out of the way of enemy attacks or off a high location whilst drawing their bow, and lots of other features that I just don't have time to go into, but check it out on your own time. Next we have Mass Effect Andromeda, an upcoming action role-playing third-person shooter video game due for release on PC, PS4 and Xbox One from developers BioWare and publishers Electronic Arts. Andromeda is a successor to Mass Effect 3, but is actually the first game within the Mass Effect series to feature an open-world environment. Players can take control of one of two characters, Sarah or Scott Ryder. Gamers familiar with the Mass Effect series will be used to choosing from 6 different character classes with individual skill sets. However, Andromeda diverts away from this model. Players now have free choice over how to build their characters and essentially assign any skill they choose to create their own specialty over the entirety of the game. To allow for experimentation, builds are not set in stone and skill points can be changed around or reallocated to allow players to try multiple gameplay styles without restarting the game. The game is set in the Andromeda Galaxy, and players explore the world by selecting destinations and navigating to said planet from inside the ship, the Tempest. Once you arrive on the planet, you can then complete quests, engage in combat, or explore the world using the all-terrain vehicle, the Nomad. The worlds are gorgeous and vast, and players can explore the planet's terrain whilst collecting resources and levelling up before taking on the planet's boss once you feel up to it. Kingdom Hearts 2.8 is Square Enix's final attempt to milk die-hard loyal fans of the series for revenue before the new release of Kingdom Hearts 3. I am the hugest Kingdom Hearts fan, but I am slightly disappointed that it has taken so long to release Kingdom Hearts 3, and instead I have had to settle with spending money on remakes of games I've already completed. Ideally, this spot on the top 10 would be for Kingdom Hearts 3. But it looks like that won't be released until at least 2018, so that's the last I'll say about it. Nonetheless, Kingdom Hearts 2.8 is a highly anticipated release that ties together the last strands of the Kingdom Hearts chronology, and this list wouldn't be complete without it. It features a remastered version of Kingdom Hearts 3D, Dream Drop Distance, featuring an overhauled battle system and improved graphics, an immediate sequel to Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep named A Fragmentary Passage, which tells the story of Aqua's journey in the realm of darkness, leading into Kingdom Hearts 3 in a short game that lasts no longer than it takes to complete a single world in a main series game, and finally an animated side story to Kingdom Hearts X in the form of an 80-minute movie. I'm going to put aside my irritation at the developer's willingness to rehash old games for cash in my rating and rate this purely on the appeal of the individual elements of the new release. So, here it is. This next one on the list is another one that you might have to take with a pinch of salt. I'm putting it on the list as there is a chance it will be released in 2017, but estimates for the release date vary from 2017 right through to 2021. So there's no real guarantee that it will actually be released this year, but it's something to keep your eye on. What we do know so far is that Cyberpunk 2077 will be either a first-person or third-person RPG set in an open-world metropolis known as Night City, a noir film-style setting set between LA and San Francisco. Cyberpunk is a subgenre of sci-fi where high-tech meets low-life, so we can sort of guess what kind of atmosphere and feel the game will have. High-tech weaponry and cybernetic modifications will undoubtedly play a big part in the game, and we already know of features such as translator implants which players need to purchase for the character in order to comprehend the non-English inhabitants of Night City. There are some interesting gameplay mechanics that have been hinted at, and if and when the game gets released, it should be a breath of fresh air in the RPG genre. Developers have stated that although the game is single player, they will be adding multiplayer features. Exactly what that is though isn't exactly clear. At this point it is anyone's best guess. With so little information to go on, it's hard to give this a rating, so I'm actually not going to rate it at all. Let's move on. Persona 5 is the 6th installment in the Persona series, and a role-playing video game by developer Atlus, planned for release in North America and Europe in April 2017. Persona 5 has a highly original plotline and artwork that will appeal to fans of Japanese games and media. It's almost like playing through a manga, so gamers who dislike Japanese style RPGs might not enjoy it. It's set in Tokyo and follows a silent protagonist who has just transferred to the fictional Shujin High School after being put on probation for assault on a stalker. Our protagonist and other students eventually awaken to their persona powers and form the Phantom Thieves of Hearts, a group of masked vigilantes who explore a supernatural realm called Palace to steal ill intent from the hearts of adults. The game incorporates standard role-playing gameplay and exploration alongside social simulation elements. The combat system is turn-based and characters use a range of elemental, physical and magical attacks, taking advantage of enemy weaknesses. What I love most about this game is the personality and sense of style in the artwork. It's really original and cool. The colour palette is really harsh and vibrant with the way the black, white and red fonts just pop out at you. It isn't the most beautiful or stunning setting, it's not got those vast open HD detailed landscapes as some of the other games have on this list, but it definitely has style and personality. I won't go into much detail about the game mechanics, plot or character development as there is a lot to talk about, but check it out for yourselves, it should be awesome. Vampire is an action role-playing game from the makers of Life is Strange, due for release in 2017 on PC, PS4 and Xbox One. Set in London in 1918 during the Spanish flu pandemic, you play as Jonathan E. Reed, a high-ranking military surgeon/vampire. Players explore a semi-open world through the darkly atmospheric streets of early 20th century London, interacting with a variety of characters, each of which has their own unique identity and importance, and accepting and completing their missions. The game requires players to feed on the blood of innocence, and although you can technically complete the game without taking a life, this will leave you incapable of leveling up. The key theme of the game is the conflicting nature of the character's dual identity as a doctor and a vampire, which should be interesting. There are a couple of interesting gameplay mechanic features, such as improvised weaponry, the ability to treat any NPC human as a target, and the ability to turn people into vampires themselves. Overall, the game has a really distinctive aesthetic, and if you're into that kind of dark, atmospheric style, then you will love it. Personally, I'm not a big fan of this kind of aesthetic, but I'm sure lots of you will be, and that's why it's so high up on this list. The story arc of this one has to rate highly. It's not as cliche as traditional RPGs, and is more accessible for a Western audience than we often find in RPGs from Japanese developers, such as Final Fantasy. Although the whole vampire thing has been done to death, the game seems like it's going to explore deeper themes, and I'm sure the whole doctor/vampire dualism will make for a gripping plotline. Number 2 on our list is a Sony exclusive from the creators of Killzone. Horizon Zero Dawn is a post-apocalyptic action-adventure RPG set in the far distant future. Our main character, Aloy, is a badass hunter-archer living in a world which, in a vision of Stephen Hawking's greatest fear, has been overrun by robotic creatures known as machines. Mankind is now few in number and only a few indigenous tribes still populate the Earth. Exactly what happened to mankind to cause the robot apocalypse remains a mystery and is uncovered throughout the game as players discover the secrets to the past through Aloy by exploring what I must say is a breathtaking open world. This game scores highly for me on both setting and story arc for sure, as the setting looks absolutely gorgeous and the story arc promises to be gripping. The open world contains a dynamic day-night cycle, and the game and narrative progresses through the completion of quests. There is a main quest line as well as an abundance of side quests for gamers that like to really go for full completion. The combat system is interesting and varied, and strategy plays an important part in combat, with players selecting ammo and weaponry based on enemy weaknesses and environments. As well as straight up melee and range combat, players can get really creative by setting traps for enemies and luring enemies into them, or hacking enemies to turn them into vehicles or companions. Players get little in terms of guidance, as the game developers chose to avoid implementing a tutorial system, forcing players to instead use trial and error to learn the gameplay mechanics. Although potentially intimidating for some players, ultimately I think this is a good thing. Pyre's Supergiant's follow-up to Bastion and Transistor, due for release on PC and PS4, it's a party-based RPG that does a great job of breaking the fourth wall and delivers the narrative/story arc to you in the form of a visual novel via on-screen narrative passages. The setting is high fantasy, and the player is cast by the characters in the role of Reader. Your job as the Reader is to help the characters travel to the land of Purgatory. The main theme of the game revolves around the nature of failure, and the developers wanted to explore this within the game by using sports as a non-violent metaphor for combat, with consequences for losing. The player's job is to basically guide their party across an overworld, leveling up the heroes via skill trees and making decisions on where to go based on available resources and timing. There are a few confusing gameplay mechanics that might be off-putting for the casual gamer, and the developers themselves acknowledge that players have to be invested in the game's narrative to come to truly appreciate the gameplay systems over time. For gamers that are willing to learn the mechanics, however, it should be awesome. The artwork is stylistic and cool, and the combat system and world is totally original and has its own unique and distinctive feel. For me, this has to take the #1 spot for the top 10 RPGs for 2017. I'm sure some of you will disagree. If so, please leave a comment letting me know what your top 10 are, and thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This has been the top 10 RPG games 2017.